as a psychologist, my area is dogged by people with yeah, personal recollections of things, and you think actually it's more complex than that. Trust is the oddity because actually you can think of it at organisation and cultural levels based on your one-to-one relationships. It's the same trust. Where does it work? And building on your point, how it works when you first meet somebody, you have to make yourself vulnerable, and be open. And yes, you risk being torpedoed, but but it is one of the very few, and maybe the only psychological concept I know of where the one-to-one stuff is the same as the cultural stuff. It's the same things we've learned over the years. If it goes wrong, you explain.
Yeah.
What you don't do is try and hide it. I think it's linked to respect. It's linked to openness. But then openness is a complex thing because being too open too early. Yeah. If you're going on your first date, for example, and you can organisation or person, how open are you? What do you say? What do you not say? And I think we could draw rules from that one-to-one operation into an organisational operation. And it is personal. Out of all the things we've discussed so far, it is the most personal thing because it's back to feelings, it's back to equity, but it just once you don't trust somebody, they can't do anything to make it better, because you just don't trust what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So the only way to change the trust we have in somebody else is to do that ourselves. It can't be done for us. And interestingly, if we think about the trust being the same at the personal and at the organizational level, trust is therefore scalable from the individual to the organizational level. But actually, if it's scaled to the organizational level, somebody is still going to be the representative of the trust in that organization.
Yes.
Because we don't trust. I don't think about whether or not I trust Apple. But actually, when I trust, I will determine whether or not I trust Apple or Google or anybody else by what happens in any individual interaction. And that will be somehow or other, either with a person, and maybe Apple and Google probably not the right analogies here because they're in the cloud, as it were. But we know when we engage with an organization, very often it would be somebody in a call center who's getting loads of flack from everybody who actually doesn't take it out on anybody at all, but we still blame them for it, for an unpleasant association.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I love the way that this discussion is pointing to the fact that leadership is a very personal thing as well, isn't it? And as you know, John, the opening chapter to our book describes a situation where an individual went and built trust in a very large organization. And a little story, in the mid-1980s, I was thrown into a role to look after about 850 people to succeed somebody who failed in their role. So I was appointed head of operations. And my predecessor was probably one of the most aggressive and hostile people you could come across. He used to actually describe his employees as the enemy. Publicly, he would describe them as the enemy. And eventually he failed in his role. And I had to go in, and because I'd seen this person who I describe in the book do what he did, I spent the next 11 months walking the whole operation. I made sure that every person in the organization saw me and heard me at least once a week. I wasn't invisible. I would speak to people. I would show an interest in them, and I would build that trust. And in the end, it really, really worked. But it required that amount of effort. And I'm sure, as you point out, I'm sure that lots of people, well, I know people said to me, I trust you, Doug. I'm not sure I trust your position, because they'd seen what people in my position had done. And so it was a very personal thing.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think what the message here is, if we understand trust and understand that, as Peter said, it's about our courage, our preparedness to see this as a challenge, that we can do something about building trust. If we're too frightened to do that, we won't be able to make that difference.
Correct.
And it comes right back to that initial question, initial discussion about leaders and leadership. The trust is the lead. It's the personal bit. It's that intangible. You trust people or you don't. Leadership is behaviours and style and systems. So at the very heart of leaders is trust and is respect. And it's the classic, can you role play trust? Can you pretend to be trustworthy? And I think people try. And I think if you do and it goes wrong, it is unrecoverable. That's you can be wrong in many respects, but if what you're trying to do is appear trustworthy when you're not, and I think it's all about cover-ups and issues and challenges. When it goes, if people were just open and honest, or didn't know and just said that, or just got it wrong and said, "Oh, I got that wrong," the world would be a better place. We're back to that because it's complex as the world is getting more complex. So that when you have a complex situation, what you need is an anchor and a leader, a trustful leader is an anchor, is a central point to what goes on. And what we haven't talked about is you have leaders and you have followers, and it goes both ways. So that the leader, the trustworthy leader, has to feel that their workforce, the people working with them, are also trustworthy. We all need that. We all need that anchor, whichever way around it is, and sometimes that gets forgotten. But a leader always has to be truthful and trustworthy. But actually, you have to.
No, I was going to say there's huge depth in what you've said. Obviously, Peter, really huge depth, and I think it comes back in a way to the mental toughness model, because for me the anchor for an individual leader needs to be their confidence and resilience in their capabilities. So, because sometimes, and it does happen, actually, it might be that the leadership figure is right, in inverted commas, whatever the situation is, and the rest of the organization isn't right or is less right. And the leadership figure needs to retain that confidence and resilience in their faith and their belief and their commitment to what they're doing. But I think the idea of confidence and resilience as the anchor allows us to say, actually, you know what? I can afford to be vulnerable in being trusting of somebody, of an organization, of a team or whatever, even if I'm not entirely sure that they'll come up with the goods, actually, because I am confident and resilient enough to know that actually, you know what, I need to do this for the organization's purposes. And actually, that's a risk that I am paid to take as a leadership figure, because we and it's one thing that we rarely talk about nowadays in leadership. And I get into trouble actually quite often for saying this. We talk about all of the good things in leadership, about empowerment, about engagement, about ensuring that we have values that we exhibit and things. We very rarely talk about results. And there is actually, and it's in the models within the book, Doug. There's one of the things is the need to balance empowerment and engagement and support for our teams with accountability to deliver results. And that's where we, as anybody who's in a leadership position really makes themselves vulnerable if they include accountability and results in their conversations. Because nowadays, of course, many people will say, actually, I'm not that bothered about the results. I want to be happy at work. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy at work. For me, work is a place where we go to be fulfilled. If it's the wrong organization, then we can go to another one. Actually, I want to feel fulfilled at work, and it means different things to different people. But actually, it also means that I need to produce some results.
Yeah, and it's a really hard balancing act, and the line might have changed. But I cut my teeth in the 70s and 80s in sports psychology research, and what you find is the most successful sports teams are the happiest. They're great. The least successful teams are the happiest. It's all right. You can be happy and awful, or you can be happy and good. The two aren't a clear link, and I think that is a problem, because you actually need productivity, efficiency, well-being running alongside. But the classic a happy workforce is a productive workforce just isn't borne out by the research. An unhappy workforce is definitely unproductive.
Yes. Yeah.
And happiness as an end in itself is really valid. And I think that's what's changed with discussions with Doug. And that can be seen as an end product without an extra add-on.
Yeah.
But there is a danger that people can be happy and go bankrupt, for want of a simpler term, and then they're less happy. And I think that's the hardest thing of a leader, as you pointed out, is balancing those two, is efficiency, productivity, and well-being. But again, when it comes to trust, if people trust the person to do the right thing, that works. And if the right thing is to keep them in a job and make the job as good as it can be, we're beginning to rock and roll in that area. But it's all about nuance. It's all about complexity. And, when you talk about mental toughness, leaders have to be able to be open and take a kicking, because it's hurtful. If people don't trust you and you think, I've just spent 3 hours in a meeting looking after your interests, I'm not allowed to say, but you think, and the other bit where I think higher levels of mental toughness can be an advantage is a willingness to change and admit you're wrong. You think you're right and you go for it. That's part of it. But actually you think, well, that was a complete ball of cotton. I got that completely hands up. That was me. And if that doesn't come across as genuine, it doesn't work. But if you can genuinely think, this is why I did it. I thought it was right. Clearly it wasn't right. Let's do it again. But and then it's leaders looking after themselves, because that's we bruise as easy as anybody else. It's just not a nice feeling sometimes. So we have to, with the more experienced people, you have to be the starting, more openness, more vulnerable. But sometimes it don't work.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things that in leadership is an absolute requisite, the willingness to accept that sometimes actually we just get it wrong. It doesn't, and even if we got it right, as you quite rightly said, sometimes it isn't going to work. So the idea that there is a solution to the conundrum of leadership, it just simply isn't true. Every context is different, every day is different, even in the same context. And I think, we come back to the mental toughness model. Actually, if we've got the confidence, the commitment, the challenge and the control in ourselves to be able to cope with the fact that the world is volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous, actually that will make us better leaders as individuals and better able to engage in the behaviors that leadership requires.
Absolutely, John. And the thing that we're discovering is that we can easily be tempted to think, we all need to be mentally tough. We need to have all of these 4 qualities. Actually, it's self-awareness that matters, because we are now coming across people who aren't as mentally tough as you'd expect, but they understand themselves and they understand why they're not getting the responses they're getting. And if you understand that, you can then do something about it. So a big part of leadership development for me is that kind of individual development.
And I think everybody who not acquires a leadership position in a formal sense, but everybody who is in any position that could be described as leadership, whether it's team leadership, individually leaders, or whatever it is, should be given free a T-shirt that says in big letters on the front, "I have no idea what I'm doing." because I've been, I've talked to some quite senior business people in my time, and actually you get them in a quiet moment and each of them will say, we're not making it up as we go along. We're using our background, our experience, our knowledge, everything. But we have no idea what we're going to do next.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's coming next. We can predict 2 minutes in the future. Other than that, we have to be capable of taking on the world as it comes. And that, for me, is where the mental toughness comes in.